Okay, so we do have some housekeeping and disclaimers and some legal mumbo jumbo before we begin. So except for the statutes and regulations cited, the contents of this presentation do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the states or the public in any way. This presentation is intended only to provide information regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies. And just note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on a public website, the Arizona FLAP webpage. You see the hyperlink there. So this webinar is geared mostly for state and local government agencies. You all are the prospective applicants. Since you all own and manage the facilities where FLAP dollars are invested, that means it falls on you to lead the application process, and we'll get into the details of all of that later in the presentation. Tomorrow, we will be hosting a webinar for the Federal Land Management Agencies, or FLMAs, in Arizona, and we'll also be flagging this opportunity for them. So some of you might start to hear from the parks and forests in your areas about potential projects. Also, just note that all application materials have been posted to the Arizona FLAP webpage since about the beginning of the month. So those are all ready for download. And for those of you that might not be familiar with the Access Program page, we'll go over all of that as well. And unless otherwise noted, federal highways and Adobe stock used under license are the sources of all the images in this presentation. And finally, this slide deck has been added to the meeting invite, and it'll also be posted on the Arizona FLAP webpage. But if you have any trouble, just let me know and I can shoot you a copy. Okie doke. So here's our general outline for today. This might be review for some of you, but for others, this could be, all brand new. So we'll start first with an intro to my agency, Federal Lands Highways. Who we are, what we do. Then we'll move on to a full rundown, the Access Program, or FLAP, A to Z. So you'll be a FLAP expert by the end of this. And then we'll get into the elements of the application packet itself. And we'll end with the call timeline, some closing items, and then open up the floor for Q&A. And there's also some key points to keep an eye out for with the little yellow indicator there. All right, so Federal Lands Highways. Basically, we're the Department of Transportation for the Federal Land Management Agencies. As I'm sure lots of you know, about a third of the United States is owned and managed by the federal government, and our office plans, designs, and builds transportation infrastructure within and leading to federal lands. And we have different programs for each, which I'll talk about in a minute here. And we do function much like a state DOT in that we deliver most of our projects, although we don't actually own or maintain any transportation assets. The rest of federal highways is under what's called the federal aid system, where funding goes to the individual states. And then the FHWA division offices have a stewardship and oversight role with the state DOTs and other local agencies. So for federal lands highways, we try to capture that in our mission statement there. And this is where Central Federal Lands, which is my office, sits within broader Department of Transportation. We're a division of Federal Lands Highways, and you can see the Land Management Agency logos there, who are our main partners. And this map shows how the country is divided into federal lands regions. So we've got Central, Eastern, and Western. Once again, I'm in Central, and our division office is in Lakewood, Colorado. So this is where I'm based out of. And our territory includes California to North Dakota to Texas and everything in between, including the great state of Arizona. These are our core capital programs. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about the Federal Lands Access Program, or FLAP, and to a lesser extent, the Federal Lands Transportation Program, or FLTP, and how those are supposed to work together. These two programs were set up to address access to and within federal lands, and ideally, they would sort of complement and support each other, and we'll get into that angle a little bit later. But the easiest way to think about this is FLTP is for federally owned transportation systems, and FLAP is non-federally owned, but provides access to public federal lands. FLAP projects are programmed through a call for projects, which we opened for Arizona earlier this month. And the owner of the facility, or the agency that maintains the facility, has to be the primary applicant. So typically this is like a state DOT or other local government agency, like the folks on this call representing counties or towns. But the ownership must be non-federal, or the local agency must agree to assume maintenance responsibility in the case of a federally owned route, like a forest highway or something like that. And we'll get into more into eligibility in a minute here. The FLTP is programmed by the land management agencies themselves, and we don't have much visibility into that process. We just deliver the projects for them. And we also have programs for U.S. federally recognized tribes and emergency federal relief. That's the TTP and the ERFO, but we aren't going to spend too much time talking about those today. Just a little bit more about Central. We have those 14 Western states I showed you on the map, and some Pacific territories, including Hawaii. And we're not just about moving people from A to B. Our federal lands are some of the nation's treasures, and the built infrastructure needs to take into account things like visitor experience and resource conservation. And our office is really at the forefront of delivering those context-sensitive projects like that. Federal lands, highways, transportation systems serve recreational travel and tourism, protect and enhance natural resources, provide sustained economic development in rural areas, and provide needed transportation access for tribal communities. So overall, we provide funding for more than 90,000 miles of federally owned and public authority owned roads which service federal lands. Central fills a niche in the transportation infrastructure ecosystem, since our projects tend to be pretty unique and we have a deep bench both among our staff and the contractors that we work with. So both in project delivery and business operations, specialties that you can see listed there on the slide. So really from long-range planning to right-of-way and utilities, environmental clearance, project management, planning, and other technical services, we really do everything. We are a strong project manager-centric organization. So if you are selected for a project, there will be a single point of contact assigned in the PM, and you don't have to navigate a complex federal bureaucracy to get information or manage contingencies. We do operate under performance metrics. So first off, we are project funded, which means we actively track our utilization. And we want to see over 75% of those dollars going towards projects and not going towards administration and overhead. We also aim to obligate over 95% of program funds on a yearly basis. So we're not carrying anything over year to year. We really are incentivized to service the clients, get those funds out the door and investment on the ground. And even though we do have a number of architecture and engineering firms on contract, we deliver a majority of the work in-house, and this keeps our staff trained and up to date. And as project closeout, we do send out satisfaction surveys, and for there, we also shoot for 85% and above. Okay, so moving on to the Access program. This is a program that's authorized by Congress in national transportation legislation, first in MAP 21 back in 2012, and it's been continued through every transportation bill through our current one, which is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or EJA. EJA authorized around $300 million per year of its life for FLAP, from 2022, and it expires at the end of fiscal year 2026. And FLAP's purpose is to improve non-federal transportation facilities that provide access to, are adjacent to, or sometimes located within federal lands, with an emphasis on high-use recreation sites and federal economic generators, which we'll get into a little bit later. So we'll start with eligibility. First, per legislation, any public highway, road, bridge, trail, trailhead, or transit system located on or adjacent to federal lands is eligible. And improvement activities include rehabilitation, restoration, new construction or reconstruction, engineering and environmental compliance, operation and maintenance of transit facilities, and planning and research. But the title and/or maintenance responsibility must be vested with state, county, local government, or tribal government. So the non-federal facility owner must be the primary applicant. Or if it's a federally owned FLMA route, it can be eligible if the local agency consents to maintain the facility through formal agreement. And we can provide examples of those if needed. There were some changes to the access program under EJA. There used to be a match requirement, and now a local match is optional, but it can help in certain situations, which I'll talk a little bit more later. And there's expanded eligibility for what are called context-sensitive solutions. And these are projects that preserve scenic, aesthetic, historic, or environmental resources. So think of like a raised boardwalk over a wetland or an aquatic organism passage over a stream, for example. There's also eligibility for signage, wayfinding, landscaping, and other visual mitigations. Typically, those elements by themselves wouldn't be competitive in a FLAP project. We would want to see the primary component of the project be a transportation facility, but now they can be included in a larger project package. And just to make it clear, I'll run through some common eligibility scenarios on the map of Rocky Mountain National Park there in green. At the top, we've got a road or trail that starts outside the federal lands and then ends somewhere inside the unit boundaries. That whole alignment, the locally owned segment and the federally owned segment in blue, would be eligible if the local agency agrees to assume maintenance responsibility for the federally owned portion. This sometimes happens when there's a county or a town that uses the road for secondary purposes, so potentially emergency access, or the road leads to some sort of municipal facility or a treatment plant. The second one down is the most straightforward scenario. You've got a locally owned road, starts outside the federal lands, ends at the federal land boundary at like a trailhead or a parking lot or fee station. If the trailhead or parking lot is locally owned and maintained, all of those facilities would be eligible in an application. And then there at the bottom, you can have a road or facility that starts outside the federal lands and ends short of the unit boundary. That would be eligible as long as it eventually leads to public federal lands. Typically, we wouldn't want to see anything farther than about 10 miles from a fed land boundary or entrance, but it doesn't have to touch federal lands to be eligible. And just to note here that the further away a project is from federal land boundaries, likely it's going to be less competitive. Tribal roads maintained by a local tribe are eligible, but the facility must access federal lands other than just tribal. Tribal lands are not eligible federal lands as the destination for this program. So for FLAP, tribal entities are treated more like a DOT or a county than an FLMA. And then finally, land leased by the federal government is not eligible. It must be federally owned. This is another scenario that we see sometimes and might be relevant in Arizona. You can have a state park surrounding a reservoir that's managed by the Army Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Reclamation. Roads or even water facilities like docks or marinas leading to the water and are within the park that are not federally maintained are eligible. And that's an opportunity for leveraged funds to be proposed in an application. If, say, the state park is already planning some improvements to the site, for example, all of those improvements could be bundled into one application for us to deliver. Or the state park could just request FLAP funds and then use those to supplement the project that they're doing. So that's eligibility. Of course, there are some edge cases and odd projects that may not fit exactly the mold. So I'm happy to talk through any of the specific project if you have one in mind, and we can do that one-on-one after this meeting. Okay, so moving on to FLAP funding. Program funding is allocated by a legislative formula, and this hasn't changed since MAP 21. Essentially, it's a function of the percentage of federal lands within a state and federal public roadway mileage by state. And this is how funding shakes out on a national basis. So unsurprisingly, Western states are favored in this program. Arizona is one of our bigger programs with about 42% of federal landmass, and that gives you an annual allocation of about $11 million per year. Honestly, that's not a ton of money in the transportation world, but if we're talking things like unpaved roads, trails, natural surface trailheads, planning projects, and leveraged opportunities with partners, that funding can start to go a little bit farther. And keep in mind that we typically will program anywhere from 2 to 4 years of funding in any call. So we could be talking, upwards of $40 million worth of projects in this call in Arizona. The latest transportation legislation, EJA did remove the local match requirement, but this is what the local requirement used to be for matching funds. So in previous years, Arizona applicants had to come up with a 5.7% local match. This does help with lowering the barrier to entry for some less well-resourced counties and states. But of course, this puts limited pressure on limited program dollars. There are instances where it does make sense for a state or local agency to want to partly or mostly fund a project with federal aid or other local funds, and then just use FLAP as a supplementary funding source, and then use us to deliver the project. That's not uncommon, and of course helps us expand the program in any one state. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but generally, if you've got a roadway or bridge or trail or whatever, where say half of the traffic is accessing the federal lands and the rest of the usage is either local or through traffic, we would want to see some commensurate local funding proposed in the project application. Okay, so now on to funds leveraging. So we don't use proposed leverage funds as a scoring criteria, but to the extent applicants can bring additional resources to the table, we can expand the program in the state and deliver more projects. And here's a rundown of eligible leveraged funding sources. Of course, a cash match with federal aid or other local general funds is kind of the most straightforward and preferred. FLTP projects can also count as leveraged funds. Again, the FLTP is the program for federally owned transportation assets. I'm going to be talking a little bit about this to the FLMAs tomorrow, but if there's an FLTP project and the need extends beyond the federal boundaries, it would make sense to bundle those projects into one package for us to design and deliver. There's significant savings when we can do projects like this, and there's a place to indicate that in the application, which I'll point out. Unlike most federal grants, we can match FLAP funds with other federal competitive sources. FLAP is unique that way, so sometimes FLAP can be used to supplement funds that may have already been awarded in a larger grant program like build or infra. That might even improve the scoring of an application as it would lower the risk profile of a project. So that's something to keep in mind. We also work with the applicants to develop a payment program that's flexible. So for example, a county was contributing general fund dollars on a project. You don't have to have all those funds available up front. And we do that through a reimbursable agreements and a payment schedule. And then just to note here, we can't receive private or nonprofit funding directly, but if the local agency has a pass-through, that could work. Alrighty, so here's a little more on the FLAP, FLTP leverage angle. As I said, these two programs can be bundled, and we do like to see that. There are some conditions. The Programming Decision Committee, or PDC, and FLMA concur on the project, and I'll talk a little bit more about the PDC later. Of course, the projects need to be, contiguous or at least adjacent to each other. And the project has to be managed as one delivery package so that we can realize those economies of scale. The PDC may also require the local agency to contribute funding, but this is sort of figured out on a case-by-case basis. And here's just a graphic example of how a joint FLTP, FLAP project could work. So say you've got a flat project to improve a county road to the entrance of a national forest, shown there in blue. And then separately, there's an FLTP project to improve the scenic drive to the parking area, the segment there in red. Those applications could be combined. Those two projects could be combined in a FLAP application. And again, this has benefits to all parties. This is also great for us because it's going to be much cheaper to deliver one larger project than to try to mobilize for two smaller projects separated by a period of years. And again, I'm going to talk to the FLMAs about this possibility since they are the ones that know about programming for the FLTP. So hopefully there are some projects, in the pipeline that line up with the needs on the local access system. All right, so moving on to project delivery. As I mentioned earlier, CFL typically leads and delivers the selected projects. And there's a place in the application to indicate this, and I'll point it out when we go through the application later. This is our business model, and part of our mission is to deliver the program. There are some exceptions to this, like major highway projects, bridge repairs, some more transit projects, but they are relatively rare. If a state or local agency does want to deliver the project, we do put some guidelines around that. First off, there should be a good justification for it, such as like the state DOT is already underway with the project and they are looking for supplemental funds to kind of close it out and finish it up. The Federal Highway State Division Office and state DOT have stewardship and oversight of the project. So there's some reporting that goes along with that. And then FLAP funds will be typically set at a fixed amount. So the PDC will say FLAP can contribute up to X dollars, and then it's up to the project sponsors to make that amount work. All right, so who makes the programming and funding decisions? Each state has a Programming Decisions Committee, or PDC, and this is a 3-person volunteer board that's established by a charter and made up of a state DOT rep, a local government rep, and then our office, Federal Highways, has 1 seat. And you can see the PDC responsibilities there, but essentially it's their task to ensure proper stewardship of program funds from a statewide perspective. It's not their job to advocate for special projects in their districts or anything like that. Now, what you don't see here on the PDC is FLMA representation. Each state has an FLMA technical advisory group, or we'll call them tags. These are typically FLMA reps from regional or national levels, and they advise the PDC, but they don't have an actual vote on the PDC. So for this program, we give asset owners the final say, but that being said, feedback from the tags is super important. So FLMAs do play a role in deliberations. Moving on to preferred projects. So providing access to high-use recreation sites and federal economic generators. So that's written into the legislation. Federal recreation is defined as any site used by the public to recreate on federal lands. Pretty straightforward. High use is defined for a region or local area and not compared across the state or entire country. So, not every county is going to have the Grand Canyon, for example, right? And federal economic generators are defined as any use of or on federal lands that increases aggregate investment or economic activity for a local community and or region. So you can think of things like ski areas, sometimes energy production, sites that have a regional or national draw, or major employment centers, but the underlying ownership does have to be federal. By way of example, we did just fund a pretty large project in Washoe County, Nevada that provides access to Black Rock City and the Burning Man Festival. This is on BLM lands. And the PDC saw that as a major economic generator and ended up picking that one out of a pretty competitive batch of applications. And these are the kinds of projects that we like to see, starting with full reconstruction or rehabilitation of a roadway, anything that expands modal access to a federal unit, like a new bike lane or new multi-use path, wholesale bridge replacements, safety enhancements, always fare well. Things like access portals, trailheads, parking lot improvements are also good projects because they serve to expand or enhance access. Obviously, a lot of this is a judgment call, but if we see a reasonable scope, realistic project estimate, and good FLMA coordination, the project will kind of meet the FLAP program vision, and that's typically going to be a stronger project. We also love to see partnerships. I think partnerships really take a project from good to great. When multiple agencies can work together on an application and develop a project that everyone is happy with and supports. This can help leverage funds or local knowledge and addresses projects of mutual interest and greatest need. I think, oftentimes many complex projects require a coalition of local champions to get them moving and funded. So the more partners at a table, I think typically the more resilient a project is going to be. And just to keep in mind, really our only goal is to service our partners and deliver quality projects that the public and public agencies want. So broad coalitions are always a good sign. We're kind of a neutral party here, and we want everybody to be happy with the projects we deliver. Okay, so weak applications, we typically don't like to do maintenance-only projects. The purpose of the program is to expand access, not patch up something that has an underlying major flaw, or to address a county's deferred maintenance backlog. We also do want to do complete projects. We wouldn't want to do a project where an underlying issue or problem isn't addressed. So say if like a road has outdated design or poor subgrade and those elements aren't addressed in the application, that would weaken the overall project. Obviously, unclear, poorly written applications don't fare very well. Make sure you pick logical termini. It wouldn't make sense to build a 4-lane road that ends at a 1-lane bridge, for example. Pictures and maps are always helpful. So whatever context you can provide to clearly communicate the purpose and need of the project. We also have a section to add a link to a video file or recorded YouTube video. It's optional, but it is helpful in assessing applications. Of course, we want to see the project meet basic eligibility criteria, and we want to see good coordination with the FLMAs. Sometimes we see applications that seem more like urban or rural commuter routes or neighborhood streets. And the federal lands access component is sort of a minority of traffic counts. Those kinds of projects can be eligible, but in cases like those, we would want to see commensurate matching funds since the Fed lands access component is secondary to other purposes like, local traffic. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the application and application process. So links you see at the top of the slide there will take you to the main FLAP landing page and to the Arizona page. There you'll see a map of the United States and other info about the access program. As you can see, Arizona is currently green, which means the process is open and we're accepting applications. Generally, a call for projects is open anywhere from 70 to 90 days. And we try to schedule calls every 3 to 4 years, depending on funding availability and our resource availability and other projects that we might be doing in the state. And the reason why we do it this way, instead of a yearly call, is because we don't want the size of a state's allocation to drive programming decisions. We'd rather develop a quality multi-year program, and we don't want to constrain ourselves by an artificial yearly number. So if you click on Arizona, this is what the state's page looks like, and this is where all the application materials and call timeline is. So I'll also post any updates here. So while the call for projects is open, you could bookmark this page. Information about your local PDC members is also here in case you got a question for one of them. And I'll also post the slide deck and video recording of today's webinar here. Okay, so let's get into the application itself. It is a relatively light lift at 8 pages total. So if you have all the information gathered, you should be able to knock it out in maybe a day or two. We've tried to make the forms as straightforward and self-explanatory as possible. And in the application PDF, I've provided a lot of sample text. You can, to try and give you a sense of what we're looking for with each question. Obviously, make sure to take the sample text out and put in your text, or leave it empty if the item doesn't apply to your project. We're not going to go line by line here. I think what I'm going to do is just point out the important elements of the application. And then, of course, I'm available if you want to follow up with me if you got any questions. So the first few pages here are just background information on you as the applicant and the project, agency with ownership and maintenance responsibility, project length, and other data points like traffic counts. If you don't have exact numbers from counters, that's fine, but estimates are better than nothing. Field 6 is where you attach a bridge inspection report if your project contains a bridge. Field 8 is really important. This is where you'll estimate or provide data about traffic counts and the percentage of daily traffic accessing the federal lands. Again, if you have counter data, that's great. But if you don't, I would say go ahead and make an estimate. This is one of the critical pieces we look at in evaluating the applications, and you locals are going to know better than us. Field 9 is where you get into crash data. Again, fine if you don't have exact numbers. Anecdotal information is better than nothing. And field 10 is where you'd indicate if there's an FLTP project in proximity. So, I put it on you guys as well to reach out to the local rangers or park superintendents in your area to see if there are any of these that might line up. And again, this is we'll flag this for the FLMAs tomorrow. Page 3 of the application gets into information about the proposed project. And this is where you can explain the purpose and need, alignment with the FLAP program. This is also where you'll provide a detailed description of the proposed work, including if the project can be phased. That's an important one, phasing, because maybe we can, fund part of a project, but not the whole thing. So it helps us know what the most critical priority is for you guys, and maybe you can get some of a project, but not everything you asked for. Page 4 is right-of-way, utility, and environmental considerations. Again, it's okay if you don't have all this information when you submit. If we do get to the point of sending a scoping engineer, they will flesh out all of these details during a scoping visit. But if you do have information about right-of-way and utilities, that's certainly helpful for us. So your, local public works or roads department or state DOT can help you with this. And this is also where you'll indicate the proposed lead agency there in field 10. Typically, again, this is central federal lands, unless there's a reason for another agency to receive funds and assume the project. Next page is cost estimation and funding sources. So this part is really just for us to get, a handle on a rough order of magnitude cost. We're not trying to get a down to the penny estimate, and we have provided cost estimation workbooks in the application materials that you can download. They are a little technical, so if you have a roadway engineer on staff to help you out, that can be helpful. You can also use your own estimating tools and workbooks. I'd say in general, be conservative with your estimates. That is, I think it's better to overestimate than underestimate cost. And this is also where you'll indicate any leverage funds, any non-flat funds. And there's a text box at the bottom of the page to describe that in narrative. And then this is also where you'll mention if there's an FLTP project in the area. This is what the cost estimate templates look like, and we have different tabs for each for different kinds of projects. So, we've got one tab for paved road, one for gravel road, multi-use path, parking lot, and so on. We've tried to pre-populate these spreadsheets with easy formulas. So whoever is scoping the project would just be entering things like quantities, and then you'd get an output for total project cost at the bottom there. And then you put that total into page 5 of the application. If you use your own cost estimation tools, make sure to include that Excel spreadsheet in your submittal materials. Okay, so moving on to evaluation criteria. So it's up to the PDC to set the exact evaluation criteria and weighting of these categories, but they will be some configuration of these 9 that you see here. Some are sort of a binary yes, no. Some are scored on a points basis. They're all pretty straightforward, just to run down the line here. So federal lands access, proximity and significance. So again, the closer to the federal lands, the better. High use recreation or federal economic generators, like we talked about. Public access, safety improvement, preservation. And this one's more about asset management and state of good repair. Sustainability and environmental, project cost and risk, partnerships and coordination, and then finally alignment with the FLAP program vision. So when you're filling out these applications, just keep these criteria in mind and speak to them as much as you can. We've also provided non-construction worksheets for transit planning and research projects. This is sort of, less quantitative and more narrative based. So if you have a non-construction project, I'd say the best ones have a clear path to lead to future FLAP construction projects. Things like corridor plans or feasibility studies, where there's a need, but you're not sure exactly what the right project might be. Or there needs to be some public engagement and consensus building before a project can proceed. Transit is always kind of a tricky one for FLAP, since FLAP is sort of a one-time infusion of capital. Doesn't really make sense to try and stand up a transit operation with FLAP alone, since operations and maintenance costs can be significant and then they are ongoing. Let's say if like an existing operator needs funds for some capital improvements or acquisition of rolling stock, sometimes we do fund those kinds of projects. Whoops. And this is the endorsement form for the facility owner to fill out. And this is just one page, but it's so we know that someone is on the hook for upkeep of the facility once it's been turned over. We wouldn't want to make an investment in a new road and have that road be abandoned or fall into disrepair. Similarly, this is the FLMA support form, also just one page, but this helps us see coordination and collaboration with the FLMA and local agencies. We wouldn't want to fund a project that's not in alignment with the management objectives of the federal unit. And also, this is a critical element of eligibility, so don't forget this one. And lastly, there is an instruction sheet and checklist. This is just to kind of help you guys stay organized and make sure you didn't miss anything, so it's sort of optional. This is also where you would paste a link to a video of the project. Again, the link is also optional, the video is optional, but this does kind of help the PDC in getting to know your project, and it kind of provides you an opportunity to sell and market the project. Okay, so that is the application, and here is our timeline for Arizona. So we will have the call for projects open for about 3 months from the beginning of September to the end of November. We're targeting to have our deliberative process complete by February of next year, so we can have a shortlist meeting sometime in the spring summer timeline. And then we're giving ourselves a generous amount of time to complete scoping, just because sometimes we do have to work around winter weather. We want our scoping engineers to be able to get eyes on the projects. But at the very latest, I think we can expect to have scoping on shortlist projects complete by the summer of 26. And that would put a final programming meeting sometime in the fall. And then that would give us construction of the selected projects sometime in the 28-29 timeframe. But a lot of that can move around, and it's dependent on the kinds of projects that we choose, where the projects are. So that's just a general time frame there. And what happens if your project is selected? So you'll be shortlisted first. You'll get a notification letter from us, and we'll set up some meetings to talk through any financial arrangements, if leveraged funds are being used, things like that. We'll also have an engagement letter for the project rep to sign. And then we'll work with you to set up a site visit for our scoping engineers to refine those cost estimates and make sure we're in the ballpark, make sure there's no major fatal flaws with the project. And if the project still looks good, the PDC will place the project in our final program and then work out a delivery schedule. And again, typically we'll take it from there and deliver the project cradle to grave. That includes, again, all right-of-way, utility, environmental, design, construction, and closeout. Also important to note here that there's really no administrative burden on the applicant, as is the case with other federal grants. That's because FLAP isn't technically a grant program. It's a formulaic program, and the funds typically stay on our side, assuming we're delivering the project. So once a project is awarded, the applicant doesn't have to go through any reporting or anything like that. And as I mentioned earlier, if another agency is delivering the project, there will be some stewardship and oversight by the state DOT, and that can get a little more involved from the applicant's perspective. All right, so just some final tips for success here. Just want to underscore again, FLMA coordination is crucial. Every round we see some applicants that didn't engage at all with the FLMAs, and it is crucial to get that FLMA support form involved, and we really do encourage applicants and FLMAs to work on project development together. So coordinate early, coordinate often. Again, review program guidance for eligibility. I'm happy to talk through kind of unique scenarios with any of you on a case-by-case basis. If you see a project you're not really sure if it's eligible, we can talk through that. All the forms are PDFs, but download them, test them early, make sure you have all the right software on your computers to be able to fill those things out. And again, answer as many questions as completely as possible. And this isn't like if some of you have worked on some larger grant programs, sometimes less can be more with the Access program. We're not looking for pages and pages of narrative. Just clearly and concisely, I would say, communicate the purpose and need of the project, and don't include anything that's superfluous or doesn't communicate what we're trying to accomplish with your project. Again, review the evaluation criteria and provide best data available. Again, anecdotal data is better than nothing at all. We understand that not everybody has trail counters or traffic counters or things like that, but if you can provide general estimates, that helps us get kind of an order of magnitude on some of those key data points in there. So that's my time, guys. We've got plenty of time here for Q&A. We're looking forward to some great projects here in Arizona. And yeah, appreciate you all attending. We've got a big group here today.
There was quite a few questions in the chat. I think we got most of those addressed, but if anybody has follow-up questions, definitely have some time here to take them, and others may have the same question, so great opportunity.
Oh goodness, I missed a whole side conversation over here.
I think, yeah, Christopher may have a question. Go ahead. Christopher Fair.
Sure, yes, thank you very much. Andrew, thanks for the presentation. Really excited about this program. Two quick questions. The first one is like a yes or no. I just want to confirm if right-of-way acquisitions are eligible for federal funding through the program.
It is, but probably not like as a standalone kind of thing.
Yeah, sure, just as a component of the project.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And second, you highlighted that coordination with other local agencies like the MPO, or we have a biking organization, et cetera, that it's encouraged. But I was curious how to prove coordination. Like in other programs, we have letters of support, but is there something like that for this program?
Yeah, so just a letter of support, and you can kind of submit those along with your application package. The only required support element docs are the FLMA coordination PDF and then the ownership document. And then any additional PDFs, we just kind of put all together into like a supplement. So, you can bundle them all together and send them to us as like one package, basically.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Andrew, just to answer Haley's question, I guess verbally instead of typing it up, there's no formal metric that's used to determine high use for each region. We coordinate with the programming decision committee members who are local to Arizona, and then we also rely on our federal land management agencies to kind of tell us. So a lot of times they'll say, that's high use for this county, or that's high use for this region. Understanding that means different things depending on where projects are. So it's not a formal metric. It's more of just relative to what else is out there. Sometimes you can see like what's the population of a county versus visitation. So nothing concrete.
Perfect. Thanks, Jill.
Yep, no problem.
About 30 people on today. Good showing. Diana, go ahead. And if you're talking, you're on mute. There we go.
I sure was. Diana from Henry County.
If we're working on biking trails and they're actually on BLM land, I think that is actually operated by one of our utility water user companies. Would that be eligible? Because it is a federally owned like levee on a canal, but it's maintained by a water user company. And the county actually wants to build trails on that. So we would essentially get an agreement with with the BLM and with the utility company.
So the utility company provides just all of the kind of operations and maintenance of the trail.
Yeah, and then they would be the ones that have access to that canal, right? To open it and close it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's eligible. Is that under a formal agreement?
Yeah, I think I would disagree, Andrew. I don't know if there's no local government agency.
Oh, right.
Like if it's not owned or maintained by the local government agency, then I would say no, it's not eligible. It has to be owned and or maintained by a local government agency.
Okay, even if we were to get a contract with that utility company.
If you had a long-term agreement to maintain the trail,
yes,
then if there was a long-term maintenance agreement and then the county is taking over maintenance of it from the utility, then yes, but not if it's just a one-time temporary easement to go in and build some trails and then you exit and the utility company maintains. So I guess that would be the difference. If the county plans to maintain the trail for the foreseeable future, then it could be eligible.
Okay, yeah, it would be an agreement between the county and the water company that we maintain it in perpetuity, right? As long as that trail is there, the county would maintain it.
So would there also would the Federal Land Management Agency be a part of that agreement if they own the underlying land?
Yes, they would have to agree to that as well.
Yeah. If that's the case, then I would agree. Yes, it would be. But yeah, if the utility company would be maintaining it, it would not. So another difference, I suppose.
Okay. And
are we talking new trail?
New trail. So we actually got funds. Well, they're going to be given to us hopefully within the next year or two. We actually got funds from your transportation plan.
Alternatives?
Yeah, that one.
Yep.
But and just to do planning on it, but we don't have funds to actually do construction on it yet. So if that's still ongoing, do you guys prefer us to have the planning and environmental documents before we apply for this grant, or would it be okay for it to be in conjunction?
Yeah, that could run concurrently.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And as Jill said, if the federal agency is granting to a public agency, to another local public agency, maintenance responsibilities in perpetuity, should be fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Josh.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for this presentation. This is fantastic. We have a very, I'm with Pima County. I apologize. I didn't introduce myself. We have a very unique project that I think is going to be great to apply for this. Is there any kind of timelines associated with projects that are adjacent or supportive of this? We quickly to explain our situation, we have two bridges that are a federal project, and in between those two bridges is an unfunded crossing that we'd like to address. But those two bridges are active already.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this warrants a side conversation, or scheduling some time with you to talk through some more details on that.
Are they active in design or in construction, or?
We are currently moving through the design phase.
I guess the biggest concern would be, contractors stepping on each other if they go to construction at the same time.
Okay.
it would just be timing of construction, but I guess there's nothing precluding you from applying just because there's a federally funded project in the vicinity. It would more just be a coordination of timing.
Okay.
Yeah, plenty of runway
that makes
here,
sense.
right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would speak to timing on the ongoing project in your application.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Don't be shy. All right, going once, going twice. All right, well, thanks everybody. Yeah, like I said, I can be your resource while this is ongoing. And yeah, we've had some really awesome projects in Arizona in the past. And in fact, that first photo that I showed there of Sabino Canyon is where I started my federal lands career many years ago with the Forest Service. So yeah, we're looking forward to some exciting projects, and feel free to reach out while we got the project the application process open. So thanks everybody. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks all.